Welcome back, everybody. It's the Fantasy Pros Dynasty Fantasy Football Podcast brought to you by Reality Sports Online. I'm your host, Scott Bogman. Follow me on the Twitter at Bogman Sports. And I'm joined, as always, by Pat Fitzmaurice at Fitz_FF. Pat, how you doing, my friend?
Bogman, I'm doing great. I mean, it's draft week. It's Christmas Eve, basically. The chestnuts are roasting, man. I'm giddy. I cannot wait for this. So
ready. If they could just give me one more month to get ready, I think I would be perfectly fine, but we're going to go. We're going to go on Thursday. And today on the show, we're going to be talking about our final top ranks at the top ends of the skill positions: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end, and get into all that. But before we get into that, I got to tell you, we got a giveaway for a DK Metcalf autographed jersey we're doing right now here at Fantasy Pros. Will S. from Maryland won this autographed jersey from Javonte Williams last week. All you need to do is subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/fantasypros. Take a screenshot and submit it to fantasypros.com/dynasty contest. That's fantasypros.com/dynasty contest. And you are entered in to win. Do it as soon as possible because this contest does end at the end of the month here. Get in as soon as you can. And just a reminder for everyone, this podcast and all other Fantasy Pros podcasts can be found at youtube.com/fantasypros, as well as quick hitting videos, live streams. And don't forget, Fantasy Pros will be hosting a live stream for days 1 and 2 of the NFL draft. That is going to start at 7 p.m. Eastern on Thursday. Pat, you're not going to be in that because you're going to be in Vegas at the draft, right?
I am, Bogman. I've never been to an NFL draft before. I have been to Vegas a few times before. But the blend of an NFL draft in Vegas is just irresistible. And some friends and I had plans to do this immediately before the pandemic hit. We were in Vegas for a friend's trip, like 2 weeks, I think, before COVID hit, and talking about how giddy we were. And all of a sudden, it went from being excited about a draft in Vegas to not leaving our house for months. And this is a long-awaited event, and I'm just so fired up about it. It's going to be fun.
Count me in as one of the people that was going to go to the previous Vegas draft because I was actually making plans. I'd called a bunch of my buddies. We had talked about some hotels and stuff. I was going to book that last weekend before COVID hit, and then obviously didn't end up booking anything because, like you said, we couldn't do anything, and we did that entire draft from Roger Goodell's basement or whatever it was. That was definitely a weird one, but back at it, going to have a full crowd. I'm sure that people are going to act like COVID doesn't exist in Vegas, but it's going to be a great, great time for you. But let's get into this. Let's talk about our final kind of top end ranks here pre-draft. Now, of course, these will change wildly. I've said it here, and I know my buddy the Welsh gets annoyed with me. I don't like ranking players before the draft because team context means so much. But I mean, we all have an opinion on these guys, right? I may not be a scout. You're not a scout, but we know we've seen this a time or two. We've been watching the NFL for a long time. Pat, a little bit longer than me because, of course, he's a little bit older than me, right? Of course, a little more experienced than me, but not much. I don't think you're actually that much older than me. But it's going to be a great time, and we all have our opinions. So let's just start at quarterback, where there is no consensus at all whatsoever when it comes to, this draft class and the QBs. This is what makes this draft the wild, wild west. There's no consensus at quarterback, which is just super rare. Most of the time, like last year, everyone knew Trevor Lawrence was going to be the number one guy. That was that. Now, the second, third guy, we didn't know, but we were pretty sure it was going to be Zach Wilson. And then third, we heard Mac Jones, and it was Trey Lance. So in this draft class, it really is wild. We don't know who the number one pick is going to be because Jacksonville is completely dysfunctional. We thought it was going to be Aiden Hutchinson the whole time. Now that we're a couple days away from the draft, it has come down to, now it's Trayvon Walker because apparently Aiden Hutchinson played for Michigan, and Balky and Jim Harbaugh hate each other so much that Balky doesn't want to make a Michigan man the number one guy. Jim Harbaugh today on the radio said, I hope he stays in the great state of Michigan to play football because he doesn't want Aiden Hutchinson going to play for Balky's organization. The petty is all over the place. So let's just talk about that first before we kick this off. this is going to be one of the wildest drafts I feel like that we've ever seen. Most teams have only 18 to 15 guys ranked as first round draft prospects. So, Pat, I mean, we're going to see a lot of trading up to begin this, right?
You would think. I think the over-under on number of trades in the first round was 5.5 on DraftKings early this week. And
those are numbers.
Yeah, so I do think you're right, Boggs. Like, it is a draft with a lot of second and third rounders, and some of those guys are going to be kicked up into the first round. We've talked about this. We don't know if there's really a quarterback we think deserves to go in the first round.
Right.
Malik Willis certainly has the potential, if he pays off and hits his ceiling, to make an NFL team grateful they took him in the first. But, there's also a fifth round, a day 3 floor there too. So
there's also no consensus at offensive tackle, right? It seems like the only position where there is a consensus that this is the number one prospect at this position is safety. With Kyle Hamilton, and maybe linebacker with Devin Lloyd. Even though I've seen some places have Nakobe Dean ranked higher than him, even though it seems like Lloyd is definitely a first rounder and Nakobe Dean is kind of on the bubble as far as going in the first round. But let's get to these quarterbacks, Pat, and we both have the same guy ranked number one. Not a surprise to anyone. You already mentioned his name. Malik Willis is our number one QB. He offers the most ceiling, which is why I like him. I know our boy Thor Nystrom has him as his number one overall player on his big board, comparing him to Mike Vick, which is a big time comparison. I don't know if I go on that far of a limb for Malik Willis, but he would be his own tier to me. Or if we're tiering these guys out, is it Malik Willis in his own, or would you put someone in there with him?
No, I think he would be his own tier too. I know that in the NFL, they seem to have it as a Willis Pickett tier.
Yeah.
And I don't feel the same way about Kenny Pickett, maybe, that some of the NFL scouting community does. What about you?
No, well, look, I'll just jump into our 2 and 3 because I think this is the same range. I have Kenny Pickett. You have Sam Howell. You have Pickett at 3. I have Howell at 3. So my reasoning for this of having Pickett at 2 and Sam Howell at 3 is that it was one of the more recent things that I read. And it was an article from The Athletic. I forget. Was it Bob McGinn? Maybe it was he who wrote it. But he talked to a bunch of scouts, right? It might have been Dane Brugler. It was a bunch of scouts. And it seemed like Sam Howell, just in terms of skill, was the number one QB. But a lot of teams didn't like him because they said, you're not going to hear him in the locker room, which is not something you want from your quarterback at all. You want a fiery leader. Pickett is that fiery type of leader. I know a lot of people take umbrage with, the fact that it took him to his senior year to play his best football. In my opinion, why do we care about anything before last season when it comes to these guys? We want the polish, and the last season is the most polished. Sam Howell took a step back. Not his fault at all. I think skill-wise, I think he is better than Kenny Pickett. But if you're not going to be that locker room guy, you're not going to be that leader, I don't know. I think that Sam Howell could be a guy that drops a day 2. And from watching drafts and seeing this process for a long time, there is a difference in mentality for a guy that is drafted in the first round versus a guy that is drafted in the second round. Nobody cares. If you're not a first round QB, nobody really cares. You have to make your success early, and you can't waver from that. If you're a first round guy, you get a lot of excuses. I mean, Mitchell Trubisky is getting another shot. Marcus Mariota is getting another shot. Carson Wentz has had an unbelievable amount of shots here because these are first round guys drafted in the first round. So the NFL just views him differently. I think Sam Howell does have a chance to slip to that second round. And if that happens, then the NFL is going to view him differently. But I do like Howell better as a prospect, a pure player. But that fire, that energy, you're getting that from Pickett. You're not getting it from Howell. So what is it about Howell that you see him and you put him just over Kenny Pickett?
So it is the age thing, Boggs, and I'm going to push back on what you said there, and that we should only look at the most recent year of production. For me, I think, aside from the fact that there have been, I think, studies and research done into this, that the early declares have more success, the guys with the early breakout age do have more success, and just the fact that Pickett did not do anything exceptional until he was this older fifth-year senior, and he is basically competing against guys much younger than him. Like the guys playing defense against him are just simply younger players. And I mean, it's kind of the same thinking that you're not impressed by an eighth grader in Pop Warner who is able to dominate against sixth graders. Now, granted, of course, that age significant melts away the older you get. And by the time you get to the NFL, it doesn't matter because you're in against a much broader age pool. And, you know, in adulthood, the physical differences sort of, you know, disappear. But in college, it's been proven that the guys with the earlier breakout age are the better bets to succeed in the NFL. And that's what we saw with Howell coming in as a freshman at North Carolina and having instant success against older players in a Power 5 conference. So I just think, and we've talked about this, Boggs, like I'm very agnostic about this quarterback class, pessimistic and agnostic. Like after the first, after Willis, I'm kind of like, you can lump the other guys in and throw them all together. But I think Howell is just the slightly better bet because of that early breakout age in college.
Now, Sam Howell right now is going off. If you just look, the first QB selected, it is Malik Willis at -190. Then it's Kenny Pickett at +170. Desmond Ridder is +1,000. Corral's +1,800. Sam Howell +4,000. So the second round thing doesn't bother you at all?
No, and I think I can't remember where his over-under was on DraftKings, and I actually did bet the over for Howell. I think it's like 47 or late 40s, and I bet over. I think he's going to get drafted later than that. But even though I think Pickett is going to be a first rounder, and it would be shocking if he weren't, I'm still going to have Howell ranked ahead of them, unless like the landing spots are so stark. Like even for Dynasty, it's not, how much are you going to care, Bogman, if like the guy has an immediate chance to play? Because some of these guys are probably going to go. I
actually don't really want any of these guys to start immediately. You know, you want them all to get a little seasoning, I think. And that's what makes this draft class dicey. Like if Seattle drafts Malik Willis, that is a dicey spot because Pete Carroll has no qualms or issues or problems with, you know, letting a young guy start. We saw that with Russell Wilson versus Matt Flynn, who they paid a bunch of money to. So if they do draft Malik Willis, week one starting for him is definitely a possibility. And I think he would smoke Drew Lock in any type of competition. It could be really good. You know, maybe he gets around professional players. They make him look better. You know, the rising tide raises all the boats, all that good old stuff. But it could be overwhelming for him too, because he didn't really know. He didn't really run a lot of great scheme at Liberty. You know, he was more of a playmaker with his legs and stuff. So that could get real dicey.
Yeah.
But the rest of our QB ranks here, just to end out our top five, you have Willis, Howell, Pickett, then Ridder and Corral. The only thing we have flipped here is I have Pickett and then Howell, because I also have Ridder at 4 and Matt Corral at 5. Are Ridder and Corral kind of a coin flip to you, or do you like Ridder way more than Corral?
A little more than Corral, just because of the rushing ability, Bogman. Yeah. It's, I mean, that's it. The fact that he ran a 4.6 at the combine, like there is some serious Konami code potential there. So when you have doubts about both of them as a passer, it's easy to take the guy who has like tangible rushing upside. Right. Yeah.
Matt Corral might have a little too much fire. You know, he might be the opposite of Sam Howell. That guy is rowdy. So, which a lot of guys will call immature. A lot of scouts will call immature and all that stuff. You know, everyone knows the story of getting in a fight with Wayne Gretzky's kid.
He crossed the Gretzky family, Bogman.
That's right. You don't do that. You don't cross royalty in sports, right? I mean, whatever. But that is, you know, that has been the thing with Matt Corral. I think those are both guys that you want to see sit. I think Detroit would be a great landing spot for either one of those dudes, because you get to sit and you're behind Jared Goff and you're not asked to do anything immediately, because the Lions really like Jared Goff from everything we've been hearing, which is to me a complete smokescreen. You know, you give your starting quarterback a little bit of a pat on the back, a little bit of a bonus, right? By saying, we love you. we're on board with you, Jared Goff, and also saying, hey, we're probably not trading for a QB, so you don't need to trade one spot in front of us and snap one up because we're not going to take one. So I would really not be shocked now. But of course, you could talk yourself in circles with these smoke screens, right? We're just waiting to see what horrible thing comes out before the NFL draft, because it seems to happen to one or two prospects every single year. Of course, we remember the Laramie Tunsil thing, right? Where he was smoking out of a mask bong or something, and someone posted the video the day of the draft when we saw him slip. He's supposed to be a top 10 pick down to like 18 or wherever he was selected. So little things like that are coming out. But in a first year rookie draft, so Malik Willis, let's just say no one's probably starting this year. Is this the same order that you're drafting them in? Or is there, if a guy is going to seemingly get to a job quicker, can anyone move ahead of Malik Willis if they look like they're going to be starting day one?
Not for me.
Me neither. The rest of these guys, though, I think I would be able to jumble them all up based on who's going to start first. Is that where you're at with them as well?
Yeah, it is, Boggs. And maybe that influences where dynasty managers are willing to take these guys in drafts. Because, like, let's say you're sitting at the end of the first round in a dynasty league. That means you were, won the title or were close to it the previous year. And you're probably still looking at an open championship window. And you're maybe looking for a guy who plays right away. So I think a lot of these guys behind Willis, especially Howell, Ritter, and Coral, are going to be going in super flex leagues late in the first round or at the very top of the second round. Yeah. I think for practical purposes, these guys are probably more useful to the guys picking early in the second round, because those guys are the teams that finished at the bottom of the league the year before, getting those early picks, unless, people trade picks, of course. So different people have claims to those picks, but for the most part, do you guys
use in your dynasty leagues, do you do the NFL draft style where if you pick one in round one, you're also picking one in round two, or does it snake for you guys?
And no snake, NFL draft style. Okay. Yeah,
I think ours mainly do snake, but I mean, because that's interesting, because you can take those two high picks and trade up to get more, but yeah, I mean, it depends on how your league works there. But yeah, that's an interesting. Superflex is definitely, all of these guys could be starting as soon as next year. And I mean, all of them could be picked in the first round. It wouldn't be that shocking. Andrew Erickson has made the point a lot of times this season that teams might want to trade up to get a QB in that first round, because you then have the fifth year option to keep them. Yes. Most QBs, if they're good, are going to be extended before that fifth year. So taking them in the second round isn't as big a deal as maybe people make it out to be. But I still think that it is definitely in some teams' plans, especially teams that could be bumping up against that cap. So
that's why I expected see Detroit take a quarterback at the very end of the third round. And I wouldn't be surprised if someone came in and tried to jump them maybe with Cincinnati at number 31 and try to grab a quarterback ahead of.
That's why they're sending out those smoke signals of we're not taking a QB because we love Jared Goff. Like anyone believes that, right? What are there any other QBs deeper than the top five? Because this is kind of the consensus. This is any list you're going to get, unless it's Matt Waldman's, of course. These are going to be your top five guys. Are you in on Carson Strong or E.J. Perry or Zappy or Thompson or any of the other QBs here?
I can't quite go with Matt Waldman on Skylar Thompson, but Carson Strong, I agree. And Matt likes Carson a lot. And I know our own Bo McBrayer at FantasyPros just profiled him for our Dynasty draft kit and was high on him and referred to him as the dollar store Dan Marino. Like he's got that arm strength, that lack of mobility.
That's a good line. I like that line a lot.
Like the injury is a concern. I mean, he basically played one-legged his last year at Nevada, and we are maybe going to see what sort of concern NFL teams have about that injury based on where he is drafted. But he's a really interesting guy because although he is not a runner at all, Waldman talked about him being very Phillip Rivers-like or
right.
Brett Favre-like, as a guy who is not going to get you rushing yardage, but can move around and avoid taking kill shots in the pocket.
I mean, Brady doesn't run. Greatest quarterback of all time is not a runner. So, it can work. It's harder to work, but it can work being an immobile guy. You saw no one would ever call Ben Roethlisberger a runner, but he had enough to wiggle his way out of situations. He's also so gigantic that nobody could pull him down. That was a part of it. But Carson Strong's a big dude too. So, and he's got a cannon, which is always nice. I don't think I would put him in the group with those guys. I think I would have, Strong and Thompson and Zappy ahead of him. But I like EJ Perry a little bit out of Brown. The guy, he backed up at Boston College, couldn't start there. Phil Dracovic was the starter, transferred and played at Brown. And his film is pretty decent. I think he could end up being a long-term backup, smart guy for a team that, could spot start here or there if there's an injury-prone guy. But we're going to go to running backs. But before we do, I got to tell you guys about Reality Sports Online. By now, most of you have probably heard of Reality Sports Online, the powerful fantasy sports platform where owners get to build and manage their fantasy team like an NFL general manager. But the question is, have you tried it? It's time to go see what all the buzz in the Dynasty community is about. Free agency, multi-year contracts, a rookie draft, multi-team trades, franchise tags, contract extensions, first-round rookie options, automated contract and salary cap functionality, and much, much more. Think it sounds complicated? It's not. The best thing about Reality Sports Online Fantasy Front Office is that it doesn't take any more time than a standard league. It just requires more strategy. That is it. Think you're among the fantasy elite? Well, use this platform to test your mettle. Still not sure? You can test your general manager skills for free, FREE, in a mock free agency auction right now. If you like what you see, use the promo code FantasyPros to receive a 10% discount on your team or league today. Fantasy just got real at realitysports.com. All right, moving over to RBs, Pat. We've got the same top four, which is somewhat surprising. Not that surprising because the top two are kind of easy. It's what order do you have them in? It's Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker. 1, 2, they're their own tier, period, end of story, correct?
Yes. By big gap between those two and anyone else.
If you're a betting man, Breece Hall is the only guy I think right now. I mean, obviously anything could happen. We've already talked about how this is a wild, wild west, but Breece Hall is the only running back that has a possibility to go in the first round, right?
It looks that way, yeah.
Would you bet on him going?
Not in the first round. I think at one point, I know Andrew Erickson's got him mocked there, but I
think I'm getting there with Erickson because Bean came on, the GM came on and said, yeah, we have no qualms with drafting a running back in the first round. If that's the position you need, that now that it seems weird. It seems smoke signally, right? Like they want somebody to trade in front of them, and that's fine because we want the defensive player, we want the corner, whatever it is anyway. But I almost feel like this is like Najee last season. Remember Najee? It was like, oh, what's Pittsburgh going to do? They're going to take an offensive lineman. They're going to take Najee, blah, 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 blah. And it was kind of from ownership in Pittsburgh. You got to take a running back, and they ended up taking Najee. This seems like this is their biggest need on offense. Offense is the thing that runs the NFL right now. So I think I like the mock spot of Breece Hall going to Buffalo.
It's a very interesting possibility. It would be a lot of fun. I would have a big smile on my face if it happened, Bogman. But I guess the reason I kind of think it won't is that, number one, Bean is sort of a big analytics guy, and all the analytics say don't take a running back in the first round. And second of all, they need a cornerback pretty badly with, Tre'Davious White coming off surgery, and they lost
Levi Wallace.
Wallace, thank you. And things fall off a little more precipitously at cornerback, I think, than they do at running back. You're still going to be able to get a good running back if, the Bills decide to button up and wait until the second round. Hell, they might get Kenneth Walker in the second round if they just stay put. I kind of think that it's going to be both of those guys going in the second, and maybe just those two. And then after that, man, all bets are off about who goes where.
Yeah, it is. The RBs are definitely going to be wild, wild west. Let's talk about Kenneth Walker a little bit, just to get his name in here. The Michigan State product. The reason I like him is, and I would really love to see him go to a team in a good offense. Atlanta is an option. Houston is an option. I feel like I would like him better, for a team like Cincinnati or Baltimore, where there's already a guy there, but this is going to be your fourth quarter guy, your home run hitter, your closer, really, in a team like that. Of course, there are more carries available and other scenarios. I think Kenneth Walker is going to be the guy if there's a guy in front of him, unless his name is Derrick Henry, he's probably going to be able to step in and take the bigger role of most of the other backs here. Not very, very much used in a receiving position at all in college, but they had some rough QBs in Michigan State who had a hard enough time throwing the ball to the wideout, so they weren't taking a ton of checkdowns to the RB here. So he's a little bit of a body catcher, needs to work on his routes and his hands a little bit, which makes Breece Hall the more complete player. But I do think Kenneth Walker has more upside.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I have a hard time differentiating between Hall and Walker as far as who has more upside. Like for me, it's I like both guys a lot. There's not a lot separating them. I mean, I might flip-flop them depending on landing spots. One thing that I know Waldman made clear in his scouting report with Walker, he talked about scheme versatility. So I think he could fit into a number of spots, and he might fit into one of those teams where, like, we aren't necessarily going to see it coming with a running back needy team. It might be a team that feels like they're already in pretty good shape at running back, but then they add Walker to the room, and hey, now we're really loaded with a 2 or 3 pronged attack. And so, I like, that's the thing, Bogman. Like, it's so
your
unpredictable.
Skin just crawl when I said Cincinnati.
Yeah, I mean, the Mixon, not me so much, because I don't think I have Mixon on any of my Dynasty rosters right now. But man, all the Mixon stakeholders would not be happy about that.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't care.
I do have
a Oklahoma. I'm not a fan. So,
yeah, I do have a Chris Evans share that I would be pretty much lighting on fire at that point.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not saying that Houston or Atlanta would be bad for him. They would be great spots for him because he would get the ball so much. But the teams that are bad right now are so bad that it's hard to imagine them spending a second or third round draft pick on a running back, which is why we're having a difficult time mocking these guys, these running backs. We could get 4 running backs drafted in the first 2 days, and then everybody else goes rounds 4 through 7 on day 3. So which are you going to be there for all 3 days? Are you going to be there for Saturday?
We are going to be there till the bitter end. We're going to be watching names peeling off the board in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, Bogman. I mean, we're going to be the hardcore draft
and
decks
your
out
Packers
there.
Got 2 first round picks. You got to be pumped, man. That's going to be such a great time. I'm jealous. Let's go down the list here. We both have Isaiah Spiller at 3. Look, it's hard for me to compliment an Aggie, but when you're watching Spiller's tape, the reason I have him at 3, I think the Draft Network has him at 1. You have been high on him during the entire process. It's the vision for me. I don't think that Spiller is going to be a guy that runs past everyone. I don't think he's going to make a lot of big explosive plays, but you know who else didn't? Le'Veon Bell. Le'Veon Bell was not an explosive playmaker in the NFL, really at any point in his career. He just consistently made plays. The thing that I see when I watch Isaiah Spiller is his vision is almost second to none. He knows exactly where he's going with the ball, and if there's a little bit of daylight, he has enough wiggle to get through there and to make a guy miss, which is more than enough. If it was just enough wiggle to do one of the two to get through, and then he's never going to make a guy miss and he's going to fall over, then he's Dexter Williams, right? But I think he has good enough vision to be ahead of all the defenders to start the play, and he has enough wiggle to make a guy miss. So I think Isaiah Spiller can make an impact in the NFL. I know a lot of people are divided on him, but you're a fan. What is it that you like about Spiller?
I think if I was going to use one adjective to describe him, I would use polished. I think he strikes me as a guy who is going to fit pretty seamlessly into the NFL. But then again, I don't know, Boggs, because I thought the same thing about Monte Ball when he was coming out of Wisconsin, like a guy who just like knew where to go, good vision, good footwork, not the fastest guy, but I thought the game would translate.
Fullback. That's the follow the fullback at Wisconsin. That's all he had to do. There's not many fullbacks. In the NFL, that was a lot of people had concerns about Leonard Fournette coming out because he's a follow the fullback type of RB, right? And then you get to the NFL, there's not many fullbacks, but Leonard Fournette had so much athleticism. Spiller doesn't have that, but he has the smarts and the enough quickness to make him a good running back in the NFL.
And quickness, yes. So he is. Yes. I don't think he's going to be another Monte Ball, lest anyone think I was describing him to that. So tell me this, Boggs. Let me ask you something. Since I think we both kind of like Spiller, but I have no idea what the NFL scouting community thinks of Spiller. So if I were to give you $100 to correctly identify which round Spiller is drafted in, what would you bet?
I would put it in round 4. That's what I would say, because I do think there are other running backs in this class that we're going to talk about in a second here. But I think that there are many teams that are looking at a specific style of running back. They want a grinder like Brian Robinson. They want a pass catcher like James White. And there's plenty of those other backs that do, a certain thing better. There's guys that are better power backs. There's guys that are better receiving options than Isaiah Spiller. But there's no other back outside of the top 2 that we mentioned in Hall and Walker that put it all together. Like you said, the polish is really, really what Spiller has. And I think if I was using one superlative, it'd be cerebral. I think the guy's smart. I think he has a plan on every single play, because you see there is no hesitation. There's no dancing in the backfield. There's no wasted movement from Isaiah Spiller when he gets the ball in his hands and he starts rolling towards the line. And I think that is the difference between him and a lot of the other backs in this class. So let's go down the list here, because we both have the same number 4 as well. And I think this is more about upside and potential, because I think Brian Robinson will end up at some point being a better back than Isaiah Spiller. The reason that I have Spiller ranked ahead of him is because Spiller comes in and he's polished. He's good to go. You can put him in a 3-down role right now today. If Brian Robinson lands in one of those spots that we mentioned before, Kansas City, Cincinnati, Baltimore, these offenses that are very, very good with the LA Rams for whatever reason, these offenses that are really, really good that already have an established player, he's going to be a rollback. He's going to be a goal line and a short yardage back and change of pace guy. But if he ends up in Houston, Atlanta, somewhere like that, I would definitely put Brian Robinson ahead of Spiller, depending on landing spot. But I definitely put him ahead of Spiller, because now it's day 1. He is probably going to be the guy. What are your thoughts on Brian Spiller? And can your ranking between Spiller and Robinson flip depending on landing spot here?
It could flip, Boggs, especially if Spiller winds up going like late 5th or something like that, and we see Robinson go in round 3.
Day 2, round 3, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that could happen, because we've got a guy whose size NFL teams are going to appreciate. They're going to appreciate that he comes from a glamorous program and has played a lot of games under the Klieg lights of the SEC. And as Waldman talked about when he was on our show, Robinson can actually catch passes. Like, he's got pretty good hands. So, although we don't see him being a 3rd down back, but hey, teams throw to their backs on 1st and 2nd down. He's better than
Damian Harris at catching, though, I think. Another Bama back that is a thumper and has tons of value. I think Robinson does that better than him, right?
Yeah. So, and as a result, I think we're going to get a certain degree of safety and draft capital with Robinson. I don't think he falls beyond the 4th round. And I think there's a good chance he goes in the 3rd round. So he could absolutely leapfrog Spiller for me. And I get the sense that you feel the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, the draft, the round matters a lot in terms of just perception around the league and who's going to get a higher opportunity first. Of course, running back is the one position where you take a guy off the scrap heap and put him in there. That's exactly what James Robinson was. Arian Foster made an incredible career being a guy that was undrafted and came in and just ended up winning a job and looked better as a pro than these guys do in college. Austin Eckler, another guy like that.
Yeah, Boggs, you're a baseball guy. It's like the closer position in baseball. Sometimes you don't have to be good to be the closer sometimes. You just have to get the opportunity.
Just got to get a shot. Right, exactly. So, I'm with you. Moving down this list here, let's do your list, and we'll read off my list, and we'll go through some of these guys. You have Rachaad White at 5, Zamir White at 6, then Dameon Pierce from Florida at 7, Jerome Ford from Cincy at 8, James Cook from Georgia at 9, and Kennedy Brooks from Oklahoma at 10. For me, I've got Zamir White at 5. I have James Cook at 6, planting flags. I've kind of talked about both those guys. Rachaad White, I have at 7. I have Dameon Pierce from Florida at 8. Ty Chandler, who's not on your list, I have him at 9. And Jerome Ford from Cincinnati at number 10. So let's start with Rachaad White. You have him at 5. I have him at 7. I think, in our most recent 3-round mock that we did over on the Fantasy Pros football show with Erickson, myself, Debro, and P. Zapia, we kind of collabed on that second and third round. And I was hitting the hammer for Rachaad White to Kansas City. I think that's a perfect landing spot for him. I think he can play. He can split out and play a little bit of wide receiver. Not that it's something you're going to ask a rookie to do very often, but I think he can be a gadgety type of player. Plus, I was all in on Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Hasn't worked out. Obviously, he's been banged up. He's shown flashes, and he is a good back, but he hasn't put it all together for a season yet. So I think Rachaad White is a guy that would be perfect there. Is Kansas City the perfect landing spot, or would you like to see him in one of those bigger roles like Atlanta or Houston?
Pretty close to perfect. And I would like to see Rachaad White go someplace that maybe has a decent offensive infrastructure. And I don't think he really gets that if he goes to Atlanta or Houston. But I'll tell you what, Boggs, I mean, with pretty much all the guys after Brian Robinson, like all the remaining 6 guys after that, and probably another 3, 4, 6 guys after that, I'm really agnostic about these guys. Like, I'm going to be flip-flopping like crazy after, like, my ranks at running back beyond number 4 are going to radically change after the draft. And
it's not really flip-flopping when you gather new information.
Right.
It's changing.
Right. Because, I mean, do you have any confidence about how the NFL feels about any of these guys? Like, I think maybe a guy like James Cook is probably a safe bet.
He has a role.
Yes.
Yeah. He's gonna get drafted to one of those teams like I talked about before, where we think Brian Robinson and Isaiah Spiller are more complete. James White is not complete, but he's gonna have a role, which is nice for him because I think he's better than his perceived role, which is why I planted my flag on James Cook, is because I think that he is going to be better than his perceived role, and he's going to get to display it early, which is nice because he's going to be a third down back to begin. And Boggs,
you call him James White, but it was a Freudian slip because he's going to be James White for someone basically with maybe a little more juice. I think he's faster, And
I think he's a bigger playmaker, right? Yeah. And he's a better between the tackles guy too. His brother's Dalvin Cook, right? A first round talent. So that was a Freudian slip if I call him James White. Yeah, James Cook. He's already ticketed for a role, so he gets to display his skill immediately, which is something that we can all get behind.
Yep. And I don't know if James White was a 5th or 6th, but I think Cook is probably going to be a 4th or 5th.
Right.
It seems that way. But some of these other guys, like, I have no idea. Zamir White.
James Cook ain't getting out of the 4th, by the way. No way.
Think?
He's not I think it's going in the 4th. Yeah. I'll be surprised if he goes past the 4th. Zamir White, I think, is a guy that NFL teams actually do like. And this is a guy that I think the community liked a little bit more than me. And I kind of had to be convinced to look at his tape because I was so all in on James Cook. I was like, Zamir White, guy got usurped by Cook, so I don't know. And then I watched him like, they just had to get both these guys on the field. They're both very, very good. And that's, they just won a natty. So they had a lot of talent, right? So I think both these guys could be better pros than they were in college because they had to split and play with each other in college. So it'd be hilarious if they're both drafted to like Houston or Atlanta or something, but then they could just reprise their roles and be very, very good for a different team. But I think Zamir White's probably the safest bet out of the rest of these guys because I do think that they like him. But like you said, Pierce, Ford, Brooks. For me, I have Pierce and Ford in here. I have Ty Chandler. I just think, like I said, I think Ty Chandler is Willie Parker that can catch. And Willie Parker had a couple great years in the NFL. Didn't have a very long career. As soon as that speed, all he had was straight line speed. So as soon as that speed evaporated, he was nothing. A lot of dancing in the backfield, a lot of indecision from Willie Parker. I think Ty Chandler is a crisper Willie Parker that can catch. So I think that he has a chance to make an impact. But any other thoughts on Pierce or Cook or Brooks? I know you have Kennedy Brooks on this list as well.
Yeah, just nothing really, Boggs. Just waiting to see where these guys go. I mean, there are things to like about all these guys. Pierce didn't really get much of an opportunity to take on a lead role at Florida, but maybe we thought he could. Like we've talked about Kennedy Brooks, from Oklahoma, and how we think maybe he's sort of underrated, but does the NFL feel that way? So, and I also have no idea how NFL teams feel about Jerome Ford. Like it seems like there's a lot to like there, but who knows?
I think Jerome Ford is probably going to come in as a change of pace back. Like if he went to Denver, it's all Javonte Williams, and then here comes Ford. When Javonte Williams needs a breather, a little bit of time off. So I think that's how they view him, and we'll see where he gets drafted. Now, let me ask you this, because I know it's the opposite. When you're making the wide receivers list, the top 10, you want to put like 10 more in.
Yes.
For the running backs, it's probably not like that. Is there any other, were you like, thank God I got Kennedy Brooks and I'm done? Or was it like, man, I wish I could put X, Y, or Z on this list as well?
I just tweeted something about this the other day. Like Tyler Badie kind of intrigues me just because
another guy that's a role guy like Cook. I think he is ticketed for a third down role to start his career. That could earn him more playing time, right?
Right. And this is despite coming from a Missouri program where he did it all for them. Like he had over
and that's in the SEC. That's against good competition.
Right. And the Missouri offense was bad. It was a bad offense. They had a bad passing game. They had no one else really to run the ball. And Badie was just this complete workhorse. He was like Walter Payton on the old Bears of the late 70s when they had nothing around him. A Walter Payton comp is a little pie in the sky, maybe. And, Badie is 5'8". It's a well-built 5'8". I think he's like 194, 195, something like that. But I mean, he's small.
Yeah.
Small and quick. But man, I mean, he did it against SEC teams who knew he was getting the ball. And he was still able to put up numbers. So I'm kind of intrigued by him. Ultimately, do I think he's going to have any sort of real fantasy relevant career? Probably a long shot. But he does sort of intrigue me as a guy. Hey, I've got a 4th round pick in my pocket in a dynasty rookie draft. Badie might be a guy I'd take a shot on.
I like Pierre Strong from South Dakota State a little bit. I got a little bit of love for Jerry Ely as well. Keontae Ingram, just because I watched him play at Texas, I know he can be. He's a little inconsistent, but he could have a decent impact as well. So those are a couple other names just to think about outside of the top 10. Now the big dog, the wide receivers here, Pat, and it's tough because we're jumbled up here. In where we have the same top 5 as does almost everyone. There are sites that have other guys popping into this top 5, which is not surprising. But this list I was annoyed with because I love Jalen Tolbert. He's probably my favorite player in this draft. I couldn't get him in the top 10 wide receivers. I just couldn't do it. So there's so many good ones. But let's start out on the top 5, and I'm just gonna blast them all off here. For Pat, it's Drake London from USC. Garrett Wilson, number 2 from Ohio State. Jameson Williams from Bama, number 3. Chris Olave from Ohio State, number 4. And Treylon Burks, number 5 from Arkansas. For me, I'm going to put it. This was tough because I had Burks as my top guy for most of the process, but I just, I do my second, third look at Jameson Williams. I can't not have him number 1. So he's my number 1, even with the injury out of Alabama. Treylon Burks is my 2. Garrett Wilson's my 3. I'm going to have Chris Olave at 4 and Drake London at 5. So you and I have flipped. I've got London at 5. You have him at 1. So I keep saying that he is somewhere between Mike Evans and N'Keal Harry. That's a big window, right? Because these are big wide receivers that don't separate particularly well. But I think it's more likely that he's Mike Evans than he's N'Keal Harry. So if he is Mike Evans, if you could put Mike Evans in this draft, everyone would take him number one, right? So that is what it seems like. That's what you're seeing out of Drake London.
It is. And I'm hoping, I think the odds say he's closer to Mike Evans while not getting quite to the Mike Evans level. But if you're going to put money on any of these guys to score the most touchdowns, I think, in their first 3 NFL seasons, I would bet Drake London. And that's ultimately why I put him there, Boggs. But for me, with these top 5 guys, for me, like, I don't think I could slide a credit card between any of the two as far as, just the little
it's
crevices.
Tight.
It is really tight. Like,
yeah, they're all talented. They're all extremely talented.
And I could make a case for pretty much ordering these top 5 any which way.
Yeah, and that's kind of the point. That's why I just burned through the top 5 here. For me, Jameson Williams, number 1. The dude is just always open. He's always open. It's barely ever a play. I know, wide receivers are divas. They always say they're always open. This guy is. He's just constantly open. I know he had the ACL tear in January. He's going to miss probably a significant amount, if not all, of his rookie season. But we've seen, that is getting less of a knock you out for a year injury every single time. And the Achilles, it's just, we're getting better medically, I guess, or more proficient at least, and the recovery time is better for these guys. So I could see him making an impact year 1. I have Treylon Burks number 2. I understand why you have him at number 5. It's because his route running is gross. It's not as good as anyone else on this list. It's not even close to anyone else on this list. But I think his athleticism is just as good, if not better. He can moss guys. He can break a tackle. He can burn a guy deep. I think he can do a little bit of everything. He was used as in a Debo role at Arkansas. So it's tough. I think Treylon Burks is going to move the most depending on landing spot out of all of these guys, though. Is that true with you as well? Yeah,
and thinking specifically of landing spots, we know the Jets are probably going to take a receiver. There's a good chance the Falcons and Washington Commanders take a receiver. There's an excellent chance the Packers wind up with one of these guys, and a pretty good chance the Saints wind up with one of these guys, and maybe Philly too. And the Saints might be kind of a low-key, interesting landing spot with Jameis Winston forcing the ball downfield, maybe Michael Thomas being shipped at some point because he doesn't seem real happy in the Big Easy. But Boggs, if any of these guys go to the Packers, any of your top 5, are they automatically your number 1 for Dynasty?
Yeah, unless somebody else ends up in Kansas City, I think I have to say yes to that. I think Kansas City, just long-term working with Pat Mahomes, because who knows how long Aaron Rodgers is going to be around. It could be just this year, it could be a couple more years. Guy could play till he's 50 like Tom Brady and just keep doing this off-season nonsense every single year, which I know you hope doesn't happen. I think those scenarios, Green Bay and Kansas City specifically, are the 2 spots where now you got to have an eyebrow raise. And there's guys below these top 5 that if they go to those scenarios could end up like, well, now we got to reevaluate and look at these guys a little bit more because they are playing with outstanding QBs. Chris Olave is just, you said it before, polish. I think Garrett Wilson has a lot of that too. They're just complete wide receivers that are solid. And they're both so fast. And Olave, great with the routes. Garrett Wilson, probably a little bit better on the deep ball. Your thoughts on the Ohio State guys?
Yeah, so with Olave, the interesting thing, I agree, polish and speed. Like, best route runner in the class.
Probably should have come out last year, Olave.
Probably should have come out last year, yeah. Best route runner in the class and sub 4.4 speed. Those are the pluses. The minuses are, there's really just one. He's not a yards after the catch guy. He goes down easy. And typically the guys who are not yards after the catch guys, the guys who are big air yards guys who don't get a lot of yards after the catch, they look like Mike Evans generally.
Yeah.
Olave, they don't look like Chris Olave. So that's kind of a, Garrett Wilson, his teammate, is a yak guy, probably the best yak guy in this class, other than maybe Jameson Williams. But that's the one possible hang up I have about Olave, but overall I like Olave a lot. Like, I think he's just such a finished product that I'm not too worried about the lack of yards after the catch. But both of these guys, I think have pretty high floors.
Yeah. All these top 5 have extremely high floors. At number 6, you've got George Pickens. I've got Jahan Dotson. At number 7, I have George Pickens. You have Christian Watson. You have got Jahan Dotson at number 8. I have John Metchie at number 8. At number 9, you have Skyy Moore. I also have Skyy Moore at 9. And then 10, you have David Bell. And I have Christian Watson. So Pickens, let's just start with him. Let's go through these guys, maybe pick up the pace a little bit here. But Pickens is a guy, he's in that top 5 in terms of skill. He may even be better physically than everybody in this class. But he's got a first-round talent, a body. He's got a 7-round brain. That's kind of what it comes to. Seems like he didn't interview very well either, and he is going to drop in the draft process because of it. He has a first-round talent, 7th-round head, like I said. So I think that's probably going to put him late in the second.
Yeah, I wish I remember who wrote the article where we saw some scouts quoted anonymously and some wide receivers coaches. I think it might have been Bob McGinn, but I'm not totally sure about that. So don't hold me to it. But the comments about Pickens were not very flattering as far as his how he was received in interviews and how people feel about him. So absolutely, like if he was a just a impeccable worker, I think we'd be seeing him as a slam dunk first rounder, but now it looks like he's going to slide into the second and maybe well into the second.
Yeah. We'll see. I mean, dude is a talent, but got to get that head screwed on tight. And sometimes that's all it takes. Dalvin Cook was kind of that guy.
Yeah.
And that's, coming out of Florida State. And, he seemed to be on the straight and narrow ever since.
And that's what one of the wide receivers coaches said, Boggs, like he needs to go someplace where there is a good veteran safety net in place to kind of like keep him on the right track. And as we know, dynasty managers do not give a crap about character as long as a guy scores fantasy points. So for the most part, I won't say that they totally disregard character, but we can look the other way if guys are helping our fantasy teams most of the time.
Jahan Dotson, I have at 6, you have at 8. For me, it's the speed, and it is the game speed. It's not just the, we saw everyone run like historic 40 times that were actually clocked incorrectly at the combine. Everyone said, look, if Jameson Williams was running in this, he would have ran a 3.98, right? Because of the times were so off. Jahan Dotson, it's the film speed. For me, it is the fact that he plays against the Big Ten and he looks like a varsity player playing on JV in the Big Ten. Tyreek Hill has that. I don't know that any other NFL player has. No, I don't know if any other player will get to that Tyreek Hill level. Like we saw I think it was a stat of, since 2015 runs over 21 miles an hour, 20 miles an hour. And it's like Tyreek Hill 45 and the next highest was like 16. Jahan Dotson has that game-breaking, game-changing type of speed that I love. Sleight of frame. He's not gigantic like Burks or London. He's not as crisp in his routes as Olave. He's not as complete or a yak guy as Garrett Wilson. But the unbelievable speed is why I have him at 6. Is that what you like about him too?
It is. And you mentioned Tyreek Hill. Like Tyreek Hill, Boggs, I think Dotson has that thing for a little receiver. I'm always amazed at how good he is at balls in the air. Like he is super competitive on these contested catches. Like he's a great tracker and he can like pick the ball away from bigger defenders. So I like him. Yeah, man. It was hard for me to put him below George Pickens and Christian Watson, but I think with those guys and their bigger frames, there's like a little more upside there. And that's the only reason. But again, 1 through 5 really tight for me. 6 through 8 really tight for me. 6 through 9 really with Skyy Moore too.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about Skyy Moore because you have him at 9. I also have him at 9. So Skyy Moore is a guy that is no pun intended, slotted to play the slot in the NFL, but he spent his whole career at Western Michigan on the outside. So I think he's going to be able to do both. My perfect landing spot for Moore would be Houston with Davis Mills, because you can work him on the outside. You can slide Brandon Cooks over to the slot if Brandon Cooks isn't traded during this draft process, which is another thing that, people forget about, but could definitely happen during the draft. You're going to see a lot of player movement during this draft for sure. But I think that's a perfect spot, because he can earn his way into a number one role very quickly with Davis Mills in Houston. What is it that you like about Skyy Moore, and do you have a perfect landing spot for him?
So what I liked about him was his highlight film, which was a really fun watch. I didn't watch a lot of Western Michigan games, Boggs, but like when I saw him,
no
I was
action in your life. Come on,
a little action every once in a while. But got to admit, though, I was kind of unfamiliar with Moore's game. Was really impressed with the tape, and just wasn't sure how he was going to be viewed in the NFL community. And now obviously like they're sold on him. I think his over under on where he goes in the draft is like 37.5 now. Like he's a guy who could conceivably sneak into the first round. In Peter King's mock, maybe it was Peter King had the Packers taking Dotson. Never mind.
Okay.
But yeah, so
the Packers would be a good spot for him too. He can play on the outside, and he is a little undersized for the Packers, though.
Peter King had
like those big guys.
They do. They're a measurables team, and Peter King had them trading up to take Dotson, which I don't think we're going to see happen. But Skyy Moore could sneak into the first round. I've seen some people pairing him with the Chiefs, Boggs. That would be pretty interesting. I don't know if I see that happening, because they've got Juju as their primary slot. At least that's where Juju has mostly played throughout his career. So we'll see.
He can play on the outside too.
He can.
But I think Moore can do both also.
Yeah.
And we saw, Tyreek Hill's a smaller guy that played mainly on the outside for Kansas City. So I think that fit isn't terrible. Probably have to trade up in the second to get him, or maybe trade back from the first and collect a couple more spots to take him, unless they wanted to burn a first round pick on him. They're one of those teams that said that, we only have 16 guys that are first round talent on our board or whatever, or 18, whatever the number was that Veach said, but that's definitely a possibility. So Kansas City would be a great spot.
Talk to me about Metchie. Sell me on Metchie.
So Metchie would definitely be in this top 5 if not for his injury. And James Williams is, despite his injury, Metchie isn't. It's the number one, the work ethic. The guy he's a guy that shows up. He does whatever role they ask him to do. He sat behind all of these guys at Alabama, and he's kind of been overlooked. This isn't people are going to laugh at me for this comp, because he is hurt right now. Metchie is. But Will Fuller without that injury type of scare is what I see. And we've seen Will Fuller put up some monster numbers when he's healthy. I think Metchie is going to be a guy that we forget about in this class, that is going to go after a lot of these buzzy names like Christian Watson, who, wasn't big coming into the process, but has earned his, his look right now through the pre-draft process by, being great at the combine, being great at the, Senior Bowl practices and all that stuff. I think that Watson is a guy that we're going to think about him first before we think about John Metchie. But Metchie's going to return kicks and punts. He is going to get open. He can make a guy miss either with speed or with his moves. And he's an incredibly hard worker. So I think Metchie is going to be a guy that is a little bit of an afterthought in this process and is going to make an impact very, very quickly. We'll see when he gets back, obviously coming off the injury. And I believe he got hurt in the SEC title game, and then Williams got hurt in the Natty. So, both these guys from Bama, Bama recruits, they know what to do. They recruit very well. So Metchie is definitely a guy that I'm going to love. Christian Watson, I have at 10. The thing for me that I didn't really know was the drop problem. And I looked, and it's like someone tweeted out, I can't remember, 12% drop rate is just terrible. So this is the if you've ever seen the movie Apollo 13, and I apologize if people listen to me a bunch because I've used this many, many times. Like, all right, when they're trying to get a couple more amps to make everything work for their getting home back to Earth, they said, well, let's scrap the parachutes. And they said, well, if the parachutes don't go off, then what's the point? right? What's the point of doing this all? That's kind of what Watson is. Like, if you get open, you burn a guy, you run pretty decent routes for being a FCS level prospect, and you get wide open and it hits you in your hands and you drop it. What's the point? He is going to be frustrating. He has to work. He's got to get, even his head coach said, he's got to get out there and work on the jugs machine. Hands are something that can be fixed, but I fear a little bit of that frustration. But the guy is a physical freak. He's a monster. And this is almost like putting him in Green Bay, to me, is almost automatic, because he has that, Megatron type of combine and measurables. And that is what they do. And they need him. And they interviewed every single wide receiver in this class multiple times. So I think Christian Watson to Green Bay is a perfect fit. And I think you would be very happy with that, right?
Interesting possibility as a replacement for a guy, Devontae Adams, who had major problems with drops early in his career, Bogman, and overcame that and wound up becoming this, prolific superstar. So yes, my one concern about the Green Bay landing spot is that, does he have the polish that Aaron Rodgers sort of demands of a rookie receiver? I picture Olave as being the perfect fit for Rodgers. But I mean, it's hard to argue with the size speed combination that Watson brings to the table. And that's, I think, why you have to why he's going to go in the first round of a lot of fantasy drafts, because there's such intoxicating upside there,
That's a good way to describe him. Intoxicating upside. You have David Bell. You've kind of been, I'll dad joke you here as if you're doing the show with Pizza Pia, the bell ringer for Bell. I think you're in my brain, you're the Bell guy. So I don't know if you feel that way, or if maybe it's just because you like him more than me and we do this show together. But do you consider yourself a Bell guy? I
do. I think I'm kind of a flag planter there. And it's just, having seen his game, I'm hoping that he turns out to be another Anquan Bolden, a guy with, very ordinary speed who just knows how to get open and, is going to turn himself into a really good NFL possession receiver. But, I'm not, after 9, my confidence starts to erode a little bit. I wrestled with putting Bell over Khalil Shakir, who I also like and is probably a little bit safer.
I'd agree with that.
I do think he's safer. Tell me about your near misses, Boggs. I know there's one in particular.
Man. Yeah, Jalen Tolbert is my favorite.
He would have been my 12 for sure.
Yeah, he I'm not fully convinced that I wouldn't put him ahead of Christian Watson right now. So because he gives me strong Deontay Johnson vibes of a guy from a smaller school that kind of gets overlooked, but when you put on the tape from Jalen from Tolbert, what you see is a guy that makes the unbelievable catches routinely. And that is what I saw from Deontay Johnson too. He gets open often. He needs to work a little bit against press, but so many of you could say that for every wide receiver because they barely face press in college. Most of the time you're given a little space in college because you don't want those guys to torch your corners. Corners in college football are not very good. Right there, because if you're long and athletic, you're a wide receiver. If you're taller than 6'5" or bigger, you're a tight end or a defensive end. That's just what it is. You put your most athletic, fast guys at wide receiver starting from high school. So that's just the way it works. So they're not facing press a lot. You're not locking up on Ahmad Gardner and Derek Stingley in every single game. So you're chasing a guy that's going to be selling cars in 2 years. So so they're giving a little cushion to these guys. So Tolbert, while that is the knock of his game, is getting off press. If that's it, man, put him in the slot. Who cares? Guy's going to make plays for you. I love Tolbert. I mean, there are a lot of guys in this class. Alec Pierce made his presence felt at the combine. I've been a Wan'Dale Robinson guy, really like him. I got like Tyquan Thornton, who I'm not very big on, but showed up at the combine. Kyle Phillips showed up at the Shrine Bowl. Danny Gray is loved by a lot of scouts. Calvin Austin is loved by a lot of scouts. So this wide receiver class is very deep. Are there any other misses that you want to talk about before we go to tight ends here?
No, you pretty much covered it. Yeah, it is much deeper, and it was much harder to, whereas we talked about running backs, some of these guys could go anywhere. Like pretty much all the top 10 have specific over-under numbers of where they're going to go in the draft. Like you can bet where most of the top 10 guys are going precisely in the draft. Like, we know how the NFL feels about these guys. We don't know so much with the running backs.
Now the tight ends are easier. We have the same top 4, which surprised me a little bit because there are good players here. But once again, we're fantasy guys first, so it didn't surprise me that much. So number 1 for us, Trey McBride from Colorado State, has been the whole process. Greg Dulcich made a little bit of noise during the Shrine Bowl and stuff like that, but he is firmly 2 behind Trey McBride. Are you? That's how we both have it listed here.
Yep.
Is it McBride in a tier by himself, then Dulcich and Ruckert for you?
Yep, exactly. And then after that, I have no confidence in anyone after number 3. None.
Yes, I'm very with you because there are guys that I like more in terms of them getting on the field. I like Bellinger from San Diego State. I think he's going to get on the field fast because he can block. I think Cade Otton can block. He's going to get on the field first too. But in terms of catching passes for fantasy purposes, those guys leave a little bit to be desired. I do think Bellinger is in the same type of, we've talked ad nauseum about Ruckert on this podcast whenever we talk about tight ends, that he was underutilized at Ohio State because they had Garrett Wilson, because they had Chris Olave, because they had Travion Henderson and Jackson Smith and Jigba, who is going to be the number 1 wide receiver off the board probably next season. They have all these weapons. They didn't have to throw the ball to Ruckert. So if he ends up in a spot where they will actually throw him the football, he is going to be way underrated in terms of fantasy. So we both like him. Dulcich is a pure pass catcher that can block, so he should be on the field fairly quickly, depending on his landing spot. And then after that, we both have Jelani Woods at 4 because he's a physical freak and he ran great numbers at the combine. He is a guy that how much would you love to see him in Tennessee, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
good
it's
pairing.
AJ Brown and nobody, right? So Jelani Woods would be amazing, and they've used these pass catching tight ends like Cook before. So I think he would be great there. And then number 5, my number 5 is Isaiah Likely because he catches a lot of passes. He's kind of the problem with Isaiah Likely, and I know Debro doesn't like him, is that he could easily be Kelvin Benjamin, a guy that's not big enough to block, but too big enough to not beat any of these defenders and have a guy draped around him all the time. Didn't run a good time at the combine either, but I feel like his play speed is better. He played against lower level, he's a G5 guy out of Coastal Carolina. So he's a little questionable, but he was very productive in college. So I like that. For you have Jake Ferguson because you are a massive homer. Is that correct?
It is because I'm a massive homer, Bogman. But, I thought about Likely.
Good too.
I thought about Likely, Otton, Bellinger, Charlie Kohler. But ultimately, I mean, Ferguson has been Wisconsin's best pass catcher for the last 2 or 3 years. Like, if he succeeds in the NFL, it's going to be as a pass catcher. And he's not a terrible blocker either. So he's maybe kind of a
good blocker.
Yeah, he's sort of a lower middle class Dulcich.
Yeah, I'm with you. Is there any other tight end that you see in this class? You go, depending on landing spot, maybe for them.
Yeah, just the Kohler, Otton, Bellinger class, pretty much. What about you?
Okonkwo, out of Maryland.
Yeah,
undersized,
sleeper.
Very much so. It had great combine. But I remember I think I was watching the Maryland spring game a couple years back. And I'm like, who is the monster at tight end that is just catching every ball and trucking everybody? And it was Chigoziem Okonkwo. And he had Lil Tua as his quarterback at Maryland, which is all right. He ain't regular Tua. I'll say that. So, not nearly as good. Also doesn't have the Alabama offensive line blocking for him and all that stuff. But I think Okonkwo is a guy that if he overcomes his size deficit, because the rest of these guys are, Woods is 6'7". These other guys are mainly 6'5", 6'4". He's 6'2.5". He's a little bit shorter. Wasn't asked to block a ton. So he's probably ticketed for a third down role early, special teams role early. But this is a guy that physically is so much faster than linebackers and a lot of corners and safeties that if he does get the opportunity, could absolutely be a sleeper, as you mentioned before. But I think that's it. Any other guys we want to talk about, or is that everything?
I think that's it, Boggs. Just got to see how it all plays out over those 3 days.
So jealous. So jealous you're going. We expect copious amount of pictures on Twitter, of course, and all that stuff. And don't think I'm not going to be hitting you up in the middle of that. I'm going to be hitting you up on our Slack chat and all that stuff to see what the live reactions are like. But remember, you can follow him on the Twitter at Fitz_FF. What do you have coming up outside of going to Vegas for the draft?
Yeah, so that's pretty much it for me. But I know my colleagues are going to be doing live streams, as you mentioned, at the top of the show. That's Thursday night during the draft. We're going to have the chat open during the live stream. And I think people should check out our Discord too, because as you know, I mean, you hang out in Discord. A lot of our analysts are going to be dropping by and talking to the people there. And it's a lively conversation. We have some great members. So check out those live streams Thursday and Friday and pop into our Discord. It's going to be a great draft, man.
And I'm going to try. I'm live streaming over on ITL for the NFL draft for our Patreon subscribers. And I know it's days 1 and 2 here, so I'm going to try to sneak Debro and Pizzapia and Erickson. I wish Pat wasn't in Vegas, but you're going to be enjoying it. But I'm going to try to sneak them in on Saturday to see if they can come in and talk a little bit of NFL draft with me during that. First 2 days I do behind the wall on Patreon. And the last day I do open on YouTube. So you can check that out, youtube.com/inthisleague. And thank you for bringing up the Discord, because I want to remind you guys in the Dynasty community, if you want to talk to me on Discord, I'm there every single Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. I could use a little bit bigger crowds, but I tell you what, I've been answering questions thoroughly for people on there because my crowds haven't been so big. So come on in. I would love to get more questions and join me. Maybe I can sucker Pat into coming in 1 or 2 times on that as well with me, and I will return the favor and do some of your stages as well, because those are fun. It's just fun answering questions and talking to people about their thoughts and draft strategy and everything else. And look, we're not above learning too. We learn a lot doing that, answering questions as well. So you follow me on the Twitter at Bogman Sports, at Fitz_FF for Fitzy. Enjoy the draft, man. We will see you guys next week. Take it easy, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Fantasy Pros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.